We are in the condition we are in the state of ignorance we are in the state of war, in the state of economic depression, in the state of depletion of the resources of our planet because of the greed of psychopaths who thought they could create their own reality. Well, look at the reality they created.
You're listening to Sott Talk Radio, the world for people who think.
Hello and welcome to all our listeners. This is Sott Talk Radio. I'm Neil Bradley, and with me tonight is co-host Joe Quinn. Hi there. SottNet techie Jason Martin.
Hey, what's up?
And we've also got Sott editor Pierre Lescaudon.
Hello. I'm
particularly happy that we've got Pierre on this evening because he's currently writing a book that'll be upcoming, published with Red Pill Press, and I think it'll encompass a lot of what we're talking about tonight, and more. So stay tuned. Watch the space. Well, it's just gone past 21st of June. That means we've just marked the summer solstice for 2013. I don't know about all of you, but
what's the summer?
What's the summer? Well, we had to light a fire that day because it was that chilly.
It's pretty chilly today, too, actually.
Indeed, I was wearing a scarf most of today.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not only it's summer right now, but we're supposed to be going through right now the maximum of solar cycle 24. So there's a function of summertime, more solar irradiance, and solar cycle maximum. So we should be sweating. We should be wearing T-shirts and tanning.
Taking the solar cycle, the 11-year solar cycle?
Yes, the 11 one.
Just taking that, all other things being equal, we would be having a warmer than usual summer.
Exactly.
Huh.
Whatever happened to global warming?
Well, it flew away. We'll be getting to that in a minute. I'm sure most of our listeners will be aware that the weather is going haywire all over the place. Certainly where you are. Just scanning the headlines, to be honest with you, it just shows it's either unusually hot in places where it shouldn't be, or more generally, it's extremely wet. It's flooding all over the place.
It's also more chaotic.
Yeah. Let's see. Just in the last week alone, we've got Spain, okay? Spain is bracing for its coldest summer in 200 years. France's main weather channel has announced that there's a 70% chance of this summer being cold and wet across Spain, France, Portugal, Germany, and Austria. So not just Spain, then the whole of Western Europe. The year without summer, 1816, is not an old wives' tale. And then in the US as well, Memorial Day, weekend snowfall smashes the 1816 record. There's that year again. 34 inches of snow fell in Cabot, Vermont on Memorial Day at the end of May. The previous record was 1 inch on the same weekend in 1816. Right now in Canada, there's a huge flood. In Alberta, I saw some photos today of Calgary. It's completely underwater. 75,000 people evacuated. The images look devastating. There were huge mudslides that seem to wipe through whole suburbs.
Well, on the upside, if there's like a flash freeze there, I mean, they're going to have like massive hockey. I mean, they can have like an entire city of people playing hockey simultaneously.
A bonus season.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the ice because in the flooding in Spain, in the north of Spain right now,
right.
just over the Pyrenees, in fact, they said that one of the reasons why it was particularly bad, besides the fact that they had, 2 months of snowfall in 12 hours, or 2 months of rainfall in 12 hours, is because the ground was still frozen from our unusually cold winter.
Right.
And it meant that the water was less likely to seep away
right.
to the normal channel. It was going over the top.
Yeah. It also explains the massive floods when you have huge rain in relatively warm weather, combined to a massive snow stock in the mountains. This rain melts the snow and combine with the melted snow to generate the massive floods that we have witnessed a few days ago in southwestern France, in the Pyrenees, with Lourdes and
I think
1 meter of mud, something like that.
I think the source of the floods in France and Spain over the Pyrenees, the main source of them were rivers who were flowing.
From snow melt?
No, from rain.
Rain, snow melt.
Large amounts of rain.
Lakes that were full because over the last 6 months you've had very high levels of rainfalls, higher than the monthly average. So you have basically the lakes that are full, the soils that are saturated with water, the rivers that are already high, and on top of that, the aquifers that are full as well.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, if you have a heavy rainfall episode, and we had many, and massive snow, massive melting of massive stock of snow, as we have now in the Pyrenees.
Mm-hmm.
There was something like 15 meters of cumulative snowfall in the Pyrenees during last winter. It leads to very unusual floods.
Yeah, there was a local report that people were still skiing in the Pyrenees.
Yeah, in early
on June
June.
1st.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, bang. I thought it was pretty symbolic that Lourdes, the holy site of pilgrimage, was washed away. Well, not washed away. It
was underwater.
There was underwater.
And the second time, it was flooded already in October, November last year.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something going on. There's some change going on. It's kind of, it's not only one event. It's a series of an event spread over a month.
When I was growing up, I was in Florida, plenty of rain and stuff like that, but I never noticed or heard about so much going on in so many different places simultaneously. That's really kind of a new thing,
Yeah, it's the amount of snow or the amount of rain that is falling all at once. Like in Canada, you mentioned in Alberta and Calgary, and there were several rivers that overflowed. And in some areas near Calgary, they got 6 months of rain in 2 days. So that's more than enough to cause flooding. It doesn't matter what shape the ground's in or what kind of defenses you have. If you get 6 months of rain in 2 days, you're screwed. You're gonna be flooded.
Yeah. But why? I have a kind of question. Maybe somebody can answer it because I don't know much about science or any of this meteorology crap. But exactly, how do you have 6 months worth of rain in like 2 days? Like, where does that even come from?
Well, there are several factors. One first factor is the jet stream. The jet stream basically is the high-speed wind at high altitude that separates polar regions from temperate regions. And over the last years, the jet stream, and later we can talk about the causes of this change, but the jet stream has been changing. Basically, it's weaker, it's meandering, it's more south. So instead of having a neat separation between cold polar air, and relatively warm, temperate air, you have a lot of mixing, chaotic, and this succession in the same place of hot air and cold air is one of the causes for depression. When you have a hot, warm place and a front cold reaching, the air cools down, there's condensation and there's rain. That's one factor. Another factor is the accumulation of dust in the atmosphere, also known as global dimming. Over the 4 last decades, you had about 3% dimming increase. Later we can talk about the source of this dust. Allegedly it's the industrial pollution, but it's probably not the real reason. And the more dust you have, actually, the more likely water vapor is likely to condensate. Because for water vapor to condensate, you need nucleation particles. You need a particle around which the droplets can form and create clouds. And another factor that is linked to this dust accumulation in the atmosphere, that actually there is a huge electric difference between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere, this kind of high altitude atmosphere. And because of this dust, the atmosphere is more conductive, electrically conductive, and you have more discharges. And maybe we talk about that later, but those electric discharges are one of the main drivers of the what we call air spirals, tornadoes, depression, hurricanes that are major sources of rainfalls. So all those factors combine, and there is another factor that is the global cooling, the reduction in solar activity. When you have global cooling, temperature drops around the globe, and temperature dropping leads to more condensation. More condensation, more rain. So you have several factors at work that act in a synergetic way.
Actually, global warming can lead to global cooling and more rain as well, in the sense that the warming of the ocean in certain parts of the planet increases convection over other areas. Say from the south, warmer. If it warmed in the south, you had warmer oceans in the south. That warm water is conveyed northwards and then evaporates into the air, and then falls as rain and falls. I mean, it's kind of quite complex system.
Because I'm so simple-minded, but I just want to get this. So basically, you have this warm band around the Earth where water kind of becomes gaseous. It evaporates, but it permeates the air, because it's kind of like a damp. It's turned into sort of a gas. And because this jet stream, which separates the warm and the cool, has degraded, when that warm air hits the cool air, and there's particulate matter in the atmosphere, condensation forms on the particles because, of course, it needs a surface to condensate, and then that causes more rainfall, in that situation. But because it has to have the hot air coming towards the cool air, the weakness of the Gulf Stream and the particles, and that causes the condensation.
Yeah, for condensation, for clouds to form, you need basically two factors. You need arrival of cold air, and you need nucleation around particles.
I know.
And
that's interesting.
And we're witnessing both an increase in atmospheric dust and meandering jet stream, generating an alternance of cold air pocket and hot air pockets.
Yeah, I mean, if you know, these floods that they had along the Pyrenees, along the south of France and into Spain over the past week, they were coming in off the Atlantic, and if you look at the jet stream and what the jet stream's been doing, the jet stream has been kind of meandering south and breaking up, allowing cold air to come down that wouldn't normally come in the wintertime, and it's coming down and it's meeting warm air coming up from, the South Atlantic type thing, and it seems to be forming these kind of fronts, rain fronts, basically, that they just came in off the Atlantic coast of France and across the Pyrenees there. And it's strange because it was really only there that in that particular episode over the past week that it happened, because we were, at the time, I was about maybe 500, not even 500 miles away, 400 miles away, and it was 30 degrees and the sun was splitting the stones, So it was very localized.
There does seem
flooding.
to be an east-west divide. The French Météo, the French meteorological organization, when they made this claim that Western Europe is in for the coldest summer in 200 years, they pulled up a reproduction of the data they have for what the summer was like back then, 1816, and compared it with the current conditions. And you see this again, this east-west divide, where temperatures from Spain, France, the Pays-Bas, the low countries, right up to the Nordic countries, are all about 3 degrees below the background regular average.
Yeah, you definitely have, and it might get worse in the short future, a divide between the eastern coast of the US and western coast of Europe. Because one of the factors we didn't mention yet is the Gulf Stream. Basically, the Gulf Stream brings hot water from the Gulf, Florida coast, up along the eastern coast of the US and east towards the western coast of Europe. And recently, in a scientific paper, it's been acknowledged that since around 2000, the Gulf Stream has been weakening.
Mhm.
It's not dead. It didn't stop. It's not a linear process, but overall, it's weakening and weakening. And actually, there are some explanation for that. But in any case, the combination of the jet stream that generates the dominant wind in Western Europe that go eastward, that brings the air warmed up by the Gulf Stream over the Atlantic Ocean towards Western Europe. You have a combination of weakening of the jet stream and weakening of the Gulf Stream. So basically, the eastwards wind blowing over Europe are much colder and much weaker. So you get far less calories. The Gulf Stream, it's the power of the jet stream every second is calculated in petawatts. Petawatts is 10 power, I don't remember how much. It's several factors more than what is produced by the whole planet,
It's like
by human beings. It's a lot of heat, a lot of calories.
a petawatt should be 1,000 times 1,000 gigawatts or something like that. It's immense.
Yeah, and there's a study recently that was recently done, a scientific report on, I think there were guys in a university in Japan, and they claim that they have found a link between the Gulf Stream and that North Atlantic drift that goes over, that warms to Western Europe from the Gulf, the South Atlantic and Gulf waters, that there's a link between that Gulf Stream and the jet stream. That basically when they used various satellite technologies, etc., to kind of view these high altitude winds like the jet stream, and they saw that they actually followed the path of the jet stream, followed the path of the Gulf Stream, so that the Gulf Stream was in some way influencing the jet stream or keeping it kind of keeping it stable perhaps. So if the Gulf Stream as a result of cooling of the oceans ceases to kind of function or stops bringing this warm air across and basically stalls, well then you have the jet stream stalling as well and not fulfilling its role of kind of keeping cold polar air north of Europe. But the whole thing is such a complex system and so interrelated that anything that changes one aspect of it feeds back into it, seems to have the effect of feeding back into it and worsening it, and creating a lot of chaos in terms of weather patterns. You just have a breakdown of the stable weather patterns that we've had, particularly in the northern hemisphere, and it starts flip-flopping all over the place. It's in a state of flux, and whether there's something else to happen before it would restabilize again, and maybe it'll restabilize in a completely different format, i.e. maybe a little ice age or something like that, as so many people have been suggesting, is as yet unknown. But right now we seem to be in the middle of a rather chaotic change or phase transition in terms of our weather, and that's having a lot of, obviously creating a lot of problems for people, and also a lot of implications for human beings in general around the world because of food production. And I mean,
well, the interesting thing that always strikes me about that particular subject is that when you learn, any kind of like natural history of evolution or the human race and stuff like that, you kind of learn about these things called ice ages. And predominantly for like a very long time, the Earth is consistently in ice ages for like 100,000 years, and then it breaks up for about 10 to 11,000 years, and then it goes back in. And this has been a consistent sort of like pattern throughout the natural history of the Earth, as far as I know, at least since the time of the dinosaurs and even before, perhaps. And so you have all of these people, and they're like, oh, yeah, but then suddenly you think that that's not going to happen again, right? And we're at the tail end or something like that of an 11,500-year interglacial cycle. I mean, even if it happens 100 years from now, I mean, the people don't seem to realize that kind of stuff, it happens, and it's a force of nature so immense. There is no government in the world that can just stop it. They can't even control the weather. They can't stop it from raining. They sure as shit can't stop it.
Well, you might actually think that, but that's quite relevant because I have a little audio clip here to play. This is our glorious leader, President Obama. This past weekend, he released a video that was an advance notice about his climate change speech that he's planning to give on Tuesday. So have a listen.
In my inaugural address, I pledged that America would respond to the growing threat of climate change for the sake of our children and future generations. This Tuesday at Georgetown University, I'll lay out my vision for where I believe we need to go. A national plan to reduce carbon pollution, prepare our country for the impacts of climate change, and lead global efforts to fight it. This is a serious challenge, but it's one uniquely suited to America's strengths. We'll need scientists to design new fuels and farmers to grow them. We'll need engineers to devise new sources of energy and businesses to make and sell them. We'll need workers to build the foundation for a clean energy economy. And we'll need all of our citizens to do our part to preserve God's creation for future generations. Our forests and waterways, our croplands, and snow-capped peaks. There's no single step that can reverse the effects of climate change. But when it comes to the world we leave our children, we owe it to them to do what we can. So I hope you'll share this message with your friends, because this is a challenge that affects everyone, and we all have a stake in solving it together. I hope to see you Tuesday. Thanks.
See you Tuesday.
Did he know we were going to have a show on?
He did. He released that particularly for the show. Actually, I asked him to if he could just
pitch in with a comment.
Pitch in with a comment. But just wanted to say thanks to the glorious leader there for
I just
words.
want to point out that like it's just God, it's so mind-boggling. It's just so mind-boggling.
Well, you know, it is mind-boggling. It focuses completely on man-made global warming. He doesn't say global warming, but there's plenty of news reports about that video and about his speech on Tuesday that are still referring to global warming, and not a word about global cooling or a word about, of course they say that global warming can cause floods and rains and all that kind of stuff, but they do not ever say what you were saying just previously, which is that there's loads and loads of science to show that human history and life on planet Earth is defined by ice ages, that we're in a little relatively small ice-free period right now, but that all of human history and all of the planet's history is essentially defined by long ice age periods.
I have an article bookmarked that I still go to every now and again when I'm feeling depressed and I need to cheer myself up. The headline goes something like, "Snow will soon become a thing of the past." It was written 10 years ago in the UK Independent. And obviously it was, about global warming. We're all entering a new warm era where snow in the UK certainly will be a thing of the past. Of course, the UK has just gone through the coldest winter since records began.
Well, for the past 3 or 4 years, it's gone through. All of Europe has gone through severe cold and snowy winters, and the US as well has been inundated with snow over the past 4 or 5 years, every single winter. To talk about climate change, as our glorious leader referred to it, which is just a euphemism for global warming, because they don't
caused by man,
of course, is ridiculous, and it's just trying to keep it anthropocentric, essentially human-centric, i.e., we are the cause, therefore we are the solution, and who has the power to affect the solutions? It's our glorious leaders. So, basically to make sure that people do not understand that our leaders cannot protect us from the changes that are already at the doorstep.
We should start referring to him as fearless leader.
Our fearless leader.
We must to catch moose and squirrel.
There's it's a double lie. Man-made global warming, actually, it's a double lie because it's hiding a real phenomenon that is a cosmically induced global cooling. And interestingly, while the elites hammer the global warming, the man-made global warming myth into our brains in more private circles, like in this Bilderberg meeting or in this Pentagon document, they directly address the global cooling topic. And not only they talk about it, so they're at least partly aware of it.
Who does where?
There is a a Pentagon document
from
in
2004, yeah.
2004, I think, a Bilderberg meeting that addressed this topic. And not only they address it, I mean, they talk about it, but they seem to be acting upon it when you see how many so-called seed banks are mushrooming around the world. So they seem to be getting ready while they lead the masses towards a cliff.
Right. So, but here's the question I have, because I don't really believe that they do that. Because the whole seed bank idea, I mean, if they understood what they were talking about, it would be, I don't know, say a good 100,000 years before they could plant those seeds. So really, I mean, what do they expect that they're going to do with them?
Yeah, they have some fanciful notion, I suppose. They're trying to cover all the bases or whatever. I don't know. It's ridiculous. But I mean, you talked about that they're well aware that global cooling is the real issue, particularly in the northern hemisphere, and particularly in the center of the evil empire today, which is USA and the UK, let's say, and Israel and a few others. That they're well aware of the reality of the situation, but they're keeping keeping strum about it. They're keeping quiet about it because, as Pierre just mentioned, there was a report commissioned by Bush in 2004 that spelled it all out about climate change and how it would cause wars and food crisis and wars for water and food and mass immigration and people trying to get across borders, etc. That was 2004.
If the world's covered in ice, I don't think there's going to be many water wars.
No, I think they're talking about, the initial. They're thinking about the initial problems, which is basically the build up to an ice age where you have no summers, very cold winters, food shortages, crop failures, and food shortages.
The only problem with what you said is the word thinking.
Yeah. But there's also, like in 2010, we reported on Sott that the Bilderberg group in 2010, they were in somewhere in Spain, near Barcelona in Spain. They had global cooling on their agenda. It was written there on their website, on their agenda, among the other topics that we're going to discuss. One of them was global cooling. Global warming wasn't even on the agenda. And, I mean, the thing is, it's so obvious. I mean, it's not even a big secret. There have been so many reports commissioned by U.S. government agencies over the past 10, 15, 20 years that show that this has nothing to do with man-made greenhouse gases or carbon emissions or anything like that. I mean, there was a 2002 report by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences that said that the available evidence suggests that abrupt climate changes are not only possible but likely in the future, potentially with large impacts on ecosystems and societies. And the evidence also shows that Earth's climate system has sensitive thresholds. Push past a threshold, the system can jump quickly from one stable operating mode to a completely different one. Just as slowly increasing pressure of a finger eventually flips a switch and turns on a light, the report said. And scientists have so far identified only one viable mechanism to induce large global abrupt climate changes. And this is something you can talk to, Pierre, because I think there's more to it than this. But they said the only viable mechanism that induces such large global abrupt climate changes is a swift reorganization of the ocean currents circulating around the Earth. These currents, collectively known as the ocean conveyor, distribute vast quantities of heat around the planet and thus play a fundamental role in governing Earth's climate. Now that's true, but it also means that it's got nothing to do with cars unless they've got some secret underground, underwater, undersea bases where there are cars driving and polluting the oceans. Then obviously that has little to do with the temperature of the oceans, has little to do directly with man-made global warming.
Maybe about this myth of man-made global warming induced by anthropogenic CO2. When you look at figures, man-made CO2 accounts for about 3% of total CO2 generated on the planet. Mostly oceans and volcanoes are the main providers of CO2.
Well, can I just finish what I was going to say there?
Oh,
actually,
I didn't know you.
I thought I had finished, but I hadn't. The point that I'm making is that they talk about vast quantities of heat. The ocean currents transport vast quantities of heat around the planet. So what they're implying here is that there would be a problem with that transportation of vast quantities of heat by the oceans, i.e. it wouldn't transport heat anymore. It would transport what? So much heat, i.e. But the whole problem with man-made global warming is that it heats things up too much. So, I mean, even in their own reports, they're pointing directly at the problem. The problem is not heating, the problem is cooling. The problem is, as far as they're concerned, the problem is the oceans and the fact that the oceans essentially are responsible for heating the planet. And if the oceans aren't able to heat the planet anymore, then we're going to have a major climate shift, i.e. the oceans will be cooled, not heated.
It's, again, a perfect example of when the government says something, just believe the exact opposite, and it's a high probability that you'll be correct. I mean, if they say it's global warming, then just invert that, it's global cooling. Just reverse everything they say.
Yeah, and I found the figures about the power transported by the Gulf Stream, knowing that there are oceanic currents in every ocean, turning clockwise in northern hemisphere, like Gulf Stream, and anti-clockwise in southern hemisphere. So just Gulf Stream carries an estimated 1.4 petawatts. It's 1.4 times 10 power 15, knowing that the human activity produce only 15 terawatts, which is 100 times less. So the Gulf Stream carries 100 times more energy than what the world consumes every second. And there was another paper that is somewhere in this pile of documents showing that actually until recently scientists thought that ice age set quite slowly over 10 years, over several years. And this paper showed that actually last ice age probably set within 3 months. It was very quick. It was very quick because one of the factors was the stalling of the oceanic currents. Now, you mentioned an interesting point, the correlation between jet stream and Gulf Stream, and it still there seems to be one. While mainstream science or some papers try to establish a causation between jet stream and Gulf Stream, another possibility that Gulf Stream and jet stream are induced by the same cause.
Yeah.
An electric one, actually. So the reduction in solar activity, which is unheard since solar cycle 14, I think, in 1906. The reduction in solar activity could explain A, the meandering weakening jet stream, and B, the weakening stalling Gulf Stream.
Well, another thing that might explain it is, I tend to agree that the Gulf Stream and the jet stream are not that one influences the other, but that they are kind of interdependent and they influence each other. They're codependent, and that both of them are influenced by something else. But one of the official ideas that specifically for the jet stream that influences or that causes the jet stream to do what it does is the rotation of the Earth, which is pretty
just kind of like a dynamo,
obvious in a way.
Whatever it is.
But of course,
the Coriolis effect. Indeed, the Coriolis effect, which is a well-known force described by science for a long time, states that a fluid, a gas, or a liquid will turn clockwise in the northern hemisphere because of spinning of the Earth, and anti-clockwise in the southern hemisphere, and that's what the oceanic current do. This being said, there might be other factors work, and but the Coriolis effect. If you look at the duration of the day duration is not constant. The days are longer and longer. So for decades, and it's been measured over a long period of time, for decades, the planet is slowing down. This is explained by mainstream science by what they call lunar bulge tidal. The moon supposedly would would generate a drag on the planet Earth and slow it down. The problem is you have some planets in the solar system that have no moon and that exhibit the same slowdown.
Mm-hmm.
So a factor that might explain the variations in Earth spin frequency is again the electric factor.
Yeah.
And in this sense, reduction in solar activity could explain why the electric field between the stator, the ionosphere, the upper atmosphere around the Earth, the magnetosphere, and the Earth per se, which act as a stator, like in an electric motor. Reduction of this field, reduction of solar activity, induce a slowdown, infinitesimal slowdown, but
and the same force could be acting on the sun to reduce sunspots at this time or increase them.
Oh, that's another kind of form, but Yeah, a question that is difficult to avoid is why is the sun activity dropping this much? It's not only solar cycle. The 11-year solar cycle, since we have a low activity that was not that is a record, a century record. So there's something else at work. And actually, that's when I started writing this book, I was puzzled by an apparent paradox. On one side, you have a drastic reduction in solar activity since the beginning of solar cycle 22, roughly 1998. And at the same time, you have a strong increase in asteroid activity around Earth in the solar system. If you check the data of the Asteroid American Society, you see a 100% increase in asteroid observed fireballs over the last 5 years. Just from 2012 to 2030, it's an increase of about 50%. So it was a paradox because theoretically, the more asteroids in a solar system, the more solar discharges. You know, it acts a bit like a bug flying in those electric bug traps, you know, with electrodes.
Bug zappers, yeah.
Bug zapper. And so you have a lot of those asteroids in the solar system, bug zappers, that are supposed to trigger solar discharges, sunspots. Sunspots, coronal mass ejections, and solar flares are the same manifestation of strong solar activity. Sunspots are just holes, actually. Holes leaving a current, electric current, traveling from the core of the sun towards the confines of the solar system. So you have a lot of asteroids, but the sun is extremely quiet. For in 2008, 2009, you had months without one single sunspot, which is almost unprecedented. I mean, there's a precedent in at the end of the 17th century. It's called the Maunder minimum. Little ice age, 50 years of famine, social unrest, crops failure, and very cold temperatures. While there was between 0 and 10 sunspots a year.
Okay, before we get into that, we have a call here, so we'll go ahead and take it. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello? Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm not sure if I'm on the air.
That's you. You're on the air.
Oh, cool. Hey, sorry. I did not mean to call in, but I'm enjoying the conversation, and I have definitely some interest about in this area. I've been following your research on Signs of the Times for so long now that I can't remember. But, yeah, my big question right now is what the environment is going to sustain when we're going to see this quantity in sustainability, such that, you know, the prices, all the confluence of social behavior and social exchange are together with the environment, the limitation of natural resources, energy. So what do you guys foresee in the next few years, say 5 years from now? And thanks for taking my call.
Okay.
Well,
so I think he's asking for a prediction.
well, without doing prediction,
Are we going to go there?
No, but we know, without going for predictions, the data for past years show a strong increase in food prices all over the world, increasing crop failures, and all the indicators tend to confirm that the current weather trends should increase. So crop failure should increase too.
Well, if you believe the UN, it's going to happen right now. I have an article here from October 2012. UN warns of looming worldwide food crisis in 2013. Collapse of global food supply inevitable. World grain reserves are so dangerously low that severe weather in the United States or other food exporting countries could trigger a major hunger crisis next year, the United Nations has warned. So there are plenty of reports. They are being broadcast, and they're warning danger zone entered, imminent. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you know they're taking these forecasts seriously.
Yeah, I think the caller mentioned, I didn't get his name, but I think he asked about energy crisis as well in terms of, the whole idea that there's an oil crisis or a lack of oil or a peak oil scenario is pure nonsense, because as far as I'm concerned, the evidence for oil being renewable resource is pretty strong, and it fits with the science. And
the point being is that we have various. I mean, like he's sitting there talking about the ocean currents are producing like 1.4 petawatts of energy, and I mean, there's an abundance of natural systems that produce energy that we don't allow the development of technology for, and that because we sort of maintain this kind of business
because they're not really controllable by.
Yeah, because the problem is that they're a little bit too free.
I mean, it seems to me that the energy on the planet for human beings to exploit and to use for their civilizations, etc., has always been free. That just by some coincidence or Mother Nature provides it for nothing, and that includes oil. But there's even more abundant and more easily accessible types of energy that would be even more difficult for the powers that be to pretend that they're limited or that they need to sell, basically, that people couldn't get for themselves for free, that wouldn't be as free as the air you breathe type of thing. But the one they picked was oil, because oil could be pitched or presented in this way that it was very difficult to extract, and that it cost a lot of money to extract, and only certain people could extract it. And now that it's a limited supply, and therefore you have to go to war, the need for energy is used as a way to justify further kind of empire building and domination of other countries and stuff. And because that's really that has been one of the rationales for the war on terror, when they ran out of ways to explain that it was about fighting terrorism. They said, behind the scenes, or not even behind the scenes, almost just kind of subtly, they were saying, okay, the war on terror thing is a bit kind of, okay, it's not really about Saddam had no weapons of mass destruction, etc. Okay, you caught us on that one, but we all know it's about, all us Americans at least, and in the West, we all realize that it's about getting the oil for us, and you all want oil, like, right? You want to run your cars, you want to run your refrigerators, you want to have your decent standard of living, right? So don't rock the boat here. Don't be giving us too much shit over this, because we're doing it for you ultimately,
That's total bullshit, though, in the end as well, because as Chris Rock observed, he's like, I don't understand it. We invade a country with oil, and suddenly gas is $4 a gallon. Type of thing, I mean.
The idea
like
being that
we invaded a country that's oil rich, and all of a sudden gas costs more. How does that work out?
Well, the profits are for the oil companies and their executives. Not, did they not mention that?
There's another aspect to the caller's question. I think he might have been getting at it. I didn't catch the whole thing, but so oil might be far more plentiful than they're letting on, but given the way things are, when shit hits the fan, what energy sources are available to you? The vast majority of people are dependent on the grid, oil-based. They're not just going to be able to access the oil and power themselves up. No. So that is going to be a fundamental problem. Yeah. Alternative sources of fuel.
When it's restricted, or when they create a phony crisis and cut off, shut down the taps, when they put themselves in a position because of their warmongering, where they actually create a situation where things do go kaflooey, and their oil refineries in the Middle East and stuff are bombed, or they don't have access to the oil anymore. Not that the oil would run out, but that basically they would create a situation where they can't get access to it because they have pissed so many people. Sure, there could be a real crisis in that sense, but it's not a real crisis in the sense of an energy crisis, like we've run out of oil.
No, but what you mean, Neil, if I correctly understand, is what about citizen access to electricity? And we just have to look at the way it works right now when there's a major flood, cold spell, strong wind, heavy snowfalls. Basically, some power stations shut down and all the lines collapse. So sure, if the weather gets really bad, really nasty, although there's plenty of raw resources, energetic resources like oil, I'm doubtful about the capacity of most citizens to access electricity because the grid will be down and probably for lasting period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they're talking about that now in Calgary. I mean, I don't know if they're exaggerating or not, but in Calgary, they're saying it could take up to 6 months for them to restore electricity to the downtown area of Calgary. So that's
just recently, for the second year running, the east coast of the U.S. has had a massive blackout from a huge mid-Atlantic storm. We're lucky if they can get systems back up online.
Mm-hmm. Thing that strikes me just on that topic, though, is that there's really no reason for the systems put into place to be so not fault tolerant, to be so weak and so easy for just even a bad storm and a little bit of flooding just knock them over. If we didn't sort of tolerate a kind of a cheap manufacturing, drop in a couple of poles, don't have any standards, maximize your profits. And it kind of leads to a lot of suffering when the shit hits the fan, when there's a flood and stuff. You begin to see that kind of way of living, that commercial consumer way of living, is actually not the benefit that you thought it was.
Yeah, and there's a lot of wishful thinking at work because when you design a power station, for example, you have a list of constraints. There's been a temperature range, wind speed range, atmospheric pressure range within which the power station can operate. And the way you define this range is based on several assumptions, beliefs. And today the predominant belief is that we are living in a neo-Platonician, Darwinian, linear, uniformitarian, mechanistic, non-catastrophist world. So all weather parameters are within a narrow range. And that's within this narrow range that we design industrial equipment. Problem is, over the last year, we've seen that more and more frequently, weather events actually are out of this narrow range. And there's a problem as far as the reliability of industrial equipment is concerned. They were not designed for that.
But here's the thing. There are buildings on this earth that have been standing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They didn't sit there and say, there's a narrow range. They said, we're going to put this into place and it's never going to fall down. And it hasn't, for the most part, except where extreme catastrophe and earthquakes may have made things crumble. But there are a large number of structures that are still around and have been around. Say, for instance, you look at cathedrals, and cathedrals kind of have this sort of not going to move it type of mentality to it, where it's not supposed to fall down. They've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, but people today, they build and construct things. Just throw it up, some particle board and some, stuff like that. And that kind of consumer mentality kind of creates things that are just basically going to fall over when a flood comes,
There's a corporate mentality as well, aiming solely at the profit maximization and therefore cost minimization, building cheap. But another point that was addressed, I think, by the caller was he mentioned the word social. If I correctly remember, it connects to one of the points you emphasized, Joe, previously. Why do the elite, while a global, cosmically induced cooling occurs, talk about the man-made global warming? And it's the same for a lot of phenomenon, cosmically induced contrails that are masqueraded or presented as man-made chemtrails. And Nautilus and clouds that are cosmically induced. We can talk about the causes, and that are presented as due to pollution or global dimming that is said to be due to industrial activity, etc., etc. So systematically, the elites, when there is one of the symptoms of this global cooling popping up, they twist it and present it as A, harmless, and B, man-made. One man-made, sure, there is a guilt trip. Sure, there is the profit and the CO2 scheme and all that. But I think the main point is what you emphasized, Joe, is that this way they maintain the fundamental illusion that they can protect the people. And this fundamental illusion is the reason why people give a mandate to the elite, because they believe, wrongly, they can be protected by the elites. Ironically, we can talk about later in the cosmic human connection. Ironically, this belief in being protected by the elites. Ironically, the people believe the elite can protect them from those cosmic events, while the elites might be at least partly responsible of those events they're supposed to protect us from. That's the irony.
It's actually mind-bogglingly obtuse for them to still be focusing on the idea of man-made global warming, because if you look at, I mean, any of them, they talk about, they cherry-pick the details of what's going on. If they see a flood somewhere, or they see a lot of rain or a change in you know, if there's drought or if there's flooding, they say, oh, man-made. They select those and say this is, you know, evidence of man-made global warming and we need to do something about it, and it's all about humans, you know, driving too many cars and, you know, too many nuclear power plants, etc. And they totally ignore all of the other stuff that's going on around that cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, be ascribed to humans. For example, while there are floods and droughts, for example, these two things that they blame on man-made global warming, at the exact same time you have a vast increase in fireballs in the skies, you have a large increase in volcanic eruptions, you have a large increase in tornadoes and hurricanes, you have mass earthquakes, animal die-offs. All of these things are happening concurrently, and they ignore all of the other details because they can't blame them on man-made global warming, on a human cause. But they're all obviously connected. Why would you not assume that they're all connected when they're all happening at the same time and they're all to do with, they're all in the sphere of the environment and, you know, the planet, the ecosystem, or the.
Well, I think one sobering fact that people should also remember is that, you know, what is it, 98 or 99% of all life that has ever risen on the planet has died and become extinct.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I mean,
there's another one you missed, Joe.
Were they driving cars with the dinosaurs or something?
Probably, yeah.
So sinkholes. Caused it.
Sinkholes. I wanted to say sinkholes. Throw sinkholes in the mix because there's an epidemic of sinkholes going around. They're eating people, you know, and it's been going on for years. We have a report on
They're
Sott
not eating
that goes
enough
back.
People.
Well, yeah. I look back and I did a rough count, and it took off. About 2005, we started getting reports daily. Well, no, we didn't get reports daily yet, but we are getting them now. And we're not just, to be honest, I just dismiss anything that could be passed off as a pothole, that's relatively small, I don't even bother with. I'm talking about sinkholes eating cars that are moving. In other words, it's opened so suddenly, you didn't have time to get out of the way. Yeah. Next thing, your car is in the ground. Mm-hmm. Sinkholes that have eaten people alive, something like 20 people have been killed by sinkholes in China alone this year.
So the
bodies disappear. They don't recover the bodies.
Yeah, because they get eaten, because there's a yum, yum, yum noise from the ground.
As you are slowly digested over 1,000 years in the pit of the stomach of the almighty Zarnak.
Exactly, that's what's happening, you know. It's science fiction becoming fact. But somebody please connect sinkholes to carbon emissions, human carbon emissions. How's that causing it?
What they're doing is they're saying it's because of the old infrastructure. Water mains are bursting.
Well, you've heard
all
about,
of a sudden?
You've heard about the carbon footprint, haven't you?
Recently there were a spate of 50 sinkholes in one Russian city over a weekend. And it freaked people there out because they were opening like 1, 2, 3, 4. There was a place in North America too where like houses were falling into them. I think it was in California, Northern California. Yeah, the sinkholes. People think of a sinkhole as generally inland, generally on a street. Part of a house disappears, but then there are huge coastal collapses, landslides
as well.
I think the one you might be thinking of is
that was inland. It was totally inland. Yeah. And there were these houses, and there was like 8 of them that had gotten eaten, and there was another 11 that basically they said we're going to get eaten, and people were basically going to have to move.
Okay.
I think it was inland in Northern California. I don't remember.
Yeah, there have been a large amount of them, and I mean it's almost like whatever's controlling. And I like to think that something is controlling these sinkholes. There's some mechanism that is
Obama
that
is Joe.
Not Obama. That because it's almost like they are increasing in number, and also
in the CIA plot.
It might be in the places that they happen. It's almost like they're increasingly trying to get people's attention, Because there was one just a few months ago of that guy who was sleeping in his bed, and it just ate his bed, ate his bedroom. It just swallowed a whole.
And they never found
underneath
him.
his bed, and they never found him. Before that it was sinkholes here and there, but over the past year or two, they have been swallowing people. Now maybe you could just put that down to the incidence of them. The more sinkholes that open up,
so many people.
And so many people, the chances are that it's going to swallow someone, and it's going to swallow more and more cars and more people as more and more of them open up around populated areas, But I mean, surely people need to start waking up and saying, okay, something's going on here, because this isn't normal, just like the dozen other things that are happening concurrently with our planet and with our environment that are not normal and clearly have nothing to do with global warming or man-made anything, although, at least not in a direct sense. It might be man-made in the sense of human beings are being such a bunch of asshats.
It's the CIA tunneling underneath your house to install
the moles.
To install NSA software.
Yeah.
NSA software to listen into your conversation.
And they just got a bit carried away.
Something happened last year that just connected it all together for me. So you had mass demonstrations. I think it was student protests that became a whole citywide Occupy movement in Montreal. It lasted a couple of weeks, and it reached a crescendo. And I think they just banned protests. The Quebec government just said, fine, it's now legal to protest. But it reached a point where there were 250,000 people on the streets, and there was video footage of this last night. There was a huge storm going on, downpour, city nearly flooded. There were tornadoes in the area, and then the next morning the streets are cleared. There's a huge sinkhole right in the main avenue where people have been protesting.
Oh yeah. I mean, the other thing I didn't mention is these groaning sounds that we mentioned. I mean, how much more do people need? I mean, if you list them all: meteorites, volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, sinkholes, large groaning sounds in the sky. What more do you want to make you sit up and take notice? What's going to be required here to make you say something's going on with our environment? And you know what? Global warming doesn't really cut it. Burning my car, me not having an electric car doesn't really satisfy me as an answer as to why all this is happening. Anyway, I wanted to read this thing. Pentagon from 2004, just to put that war and terrorism in context. This is the report that Pierre was referring to from 2004. You can look it up if you Google something like "Now the Pentagon Tells Bush." Google that. Now the Pentagon tells Bush climate change will destroy us. And here's the first couple of paragraphs. Climate change over the next 20 years could result in a global catastrophe costing millions of lives in wars and natural disasters. A secret report suppressed by US defense chiefs and obtained by The Observer warns that major European cities will be sunk beneath rising seas as Britain is plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020. Nuclear conflict, megadroughts, famine, and widespread rioting will erupt across the world. The document predicts that abrupt climate change could bring the planet to the edge of anarchy as countries develop a nuclear threat to defend and secure dwindling food, water, and energy supplies. Is that what Iran's doing? Here's the most important part. The threat to global stability vastly eclipses that of terrorism, say the few experts privy to its contents. That was in 2004.
Mm-hmm. And yet they continued.
Well, not only did they continue, they surely knew about this beforehand, because this is when this report is from 2004. They don't say when the report was actually commissioned. It was probably commissioned several years beforehand and was known about several years beforehand. So before they started the war on terror, they were given hard data, comprehensive data, by experts, and I think there were even military people involved in this, who told the Bush administration that this threat that was imminent vastly eclipsed the threat of terrorism, which was virtually insignificant. Yet, they launched a war on terror. What does that tell you? What does it tell you, Neil?
It tells me what a very quick search on Wikipedia about ice ages told me yesterday. It's all there. You don't even need to look too hard to realize this plain and simple fact that human civilization has existed within a very narrow window, surrounded by deep ice age. These windows are called interglacials. I think Jason mentioned them earlier. The interglacial lasts on average 11.5 thousand years. We are currently at 12,000 years of the current epoch, the Holocene epoch. We are overdue.
An ice age.
An ice age.
And we have all the evidence at once.
There's nothing woo-woo about that. That is established.
Well, another piece of evidence that should raise our attention is that the synchronicity in the apparition or worsening of all those symptoms. It tends to prove that they are related. When you look at sinkholes, contrails, noctilucent clouds, punctual clouds, increase in earthquakes, increase in volcanic eruptions, reduction in oceanic currents, meandering of jet streams, apparition of sinkholes, and I forget some of the symptoms. They all started to emerge or to start to be on the increase for the known ones, like earthquakes, around 2000. Around 2000.
I wonder what happened around that time.
But there are two maybe I go back to the story I was saying that this apparent paradox, increase in asteroid activity and decrease in solar activity, that happens as well around 2000, 1998. It's apparently incompatible. However, one piece of the puzzle was brought by a study conducted by two researchers, Ropp and Sepkowski, who demonstrated that there was a cycle in mass extinctions, 27 million years cycle. And then once this discovery was made and confirmed by the researcher that clarified the figures and found a 26.9 million years period, some other researchers started to look at it and try to find the cause. The first hypothesis was an asteroid, on a 27 million years orbit, passing nearby the
But that only worked for one of them.
Exactly, and the other problem is that such an eccentric and long orbit cannot be stable. The asteroid would be deviated from its course by the Sun, Jupiter, and other massive celestial bodies. So a researcher called Mueller, a student and a co-researcher with Alvarez, the Nobel Prize nominee, postulated that it was not an asteroid, but it was a binary star system, that the Sun was forming with a small star that he called Nemesis.
Like a companion star.
A companion star, a companion sun. It can seem totally crazy, but first, about 80% of the stars are in a binary or multiplanetary system. It's very unusual to have a single star because of a process called electric fissioning. There's so much electricity, energy generated around stars that they fission in order to increase the surface and to reduce the electric stress per square meters or per square kilometers. That's the first thing. Most stars are in a binary or multiplanetary system. And the second thing is that Mueller conducted some researches in the stratas relating to this 27 million years ago event. And he discovered abnormal level of iridium. So now iridium is a noble metal like gold and platinum, and those high concentration of iridium are found mostly in asteroid material. And that was so he conducted researches 66 sites all over the planet, and consistently he found abnormal level of iridiums in the EO layer, the strata 27 million years ago, which confirmed that indeed an asteroid had killed dinosaurs 27 million years ago. So here we go. We had this hypothesis that was confirmed by data that the Sun was not alone. He had a companion, probably a bone star, a small invisible star that every 27 million years goes very close to our planet, to our solar system, and that brings disrupts and brings along on its path a cometary swarm from the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is like a big cloud of 10 power 11 comets away from the solar system, and along its path, Nemesis disturbs this Oort cloud and brings some comets with it.
Kind of like a bowling ball through pens.
Yeah, and this theory is not. I mean, you said it might sound strange. It's not strange. It's officially accepted as a possibility that that our sun is part of a binary system. It's like you said, 80% of other stars are in a binary system. So why not ours? So I mean, it's just that we haven't been able to identify, or at least not that we know of.
It turns out
companion has not been identified.
That seeing shit in space is actually really difficult.
Very far away stuff as well.
Big, and I mean, like black on black really doesn't help you much.
Especially if this Nemesis is a brown dwarf.
Exactly.
It's a small star that is dark matter. So you're trying to find dark matter over a dark background.
Yeah.
Very difficult, and actually this Nemesis hypothesis reconciles the apparent paradox I was mentioning previously, i.e. increase asteroid activity, cometary activity in solar system, and reduction in solar activity, because a sun companion, Nemesis, could, ground the sun. It could tap in the same galactic current, source of energy, the same source as the sun, and reduce the power source of the sun, hence the reduction in solar activity despite the increase in asteroid. Which would explain the increase in cometary activity as well, because of the swarm.
The decrease of the spinning of the Earth.
It may also have an effect on the Earth,
Actually, in a synergic way, the spinning of the Earth, if you have an approaching Nemesis with a cometary swarm, the approaching Nemesis explains the reduction in solar activity, which explains the slowdown in planet. Remember the electric motor analogy. And at the same time, the accompanying swarm that goes with Nemesis explains the increase in atmospheric dust. That is one of the factors that explains the slowdown of the Earth.
And we've had a couple of flybys from these comets. I mean, do they spray dust, or does dust come off them or something?
Yeah, they do, because actually when you talk about an accompanying cometary swarm, there's a lot of size variability. You have comets, you have comet fragments, you have comet chunks, and you have a lot of cometary dust. So they're all kind of size, and there's a lot of dust. In Alvarez, the Nobel Prize, measured those figures. It's 10 power 6 tons, 10 power 10 tons. During low cometary activity, you have 10 power something tons of cometary dust that reach the Earth every year.
That's a lot.
So it's a factor to take into account.
We have a call here. There's a guy been trying to call in a few times, so I'm going to go ahead and take it. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Hi, Michael Thomas James.
How do you know his name?
It's on screen here. Hello, caller.
Michael, you're on air.
Hello. Well,
he apparently entered.
He'd been trying to call and getting cut off, whatever reason.
He might have hung up.
Yeah,
he might have hung up.
Well, Go ahead.
I want to be a caller for a question.
Go ahead. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name's Joe.
No, it's not.
Who's your per?
Pierre, you're talking about a 27-something thereabouts million-year cycle, but clearly there have been cometary events like swarms on a much smaller timescale as well.
Well, yes, like ice ages, cometary activity is punctuated by numerous interrelated cycles, like the sun activity, every year. The Earth orbit go through swarms, the Taurids, the Leonids, the Perseids. That's one cycle. There are other cycles. There's a lot of comets who have what is called a Jupiterian orbit, the circle around the Sun and Jupiter. And every decades, every century, we pass nearby those comets. There are comets as well that are one-time comets.
Exactly. So here's the possibility then is that we need to redefine the nature of life on human Earth, on life on planet Earth. and that it's not as safe and secure as people have been led to believe, and that throughout the course of human history, including relatively recent history, the planet has been hit by meteorites, and is hit in a general sense on a regular basis, or encounters meteorite swarms or a meteorite or of that nature very regularly, maybe on a cycle of, who knows, I mean, you could pick a figure, but at the very least, if you read Mike Bailey's work, the last major one was less than 1,500 years ago. So we can say at the very least that if that's a cycle, then there's a cycle of 1,500 years, or 1,500 or 1,600 years, and then there's bigger cycles within that, and those smaller cycles don't necessarily have the effect of the kind of planetary and ecosystem chaos that we're seeing now, because they're not accompanied by the companion star. But there's a companion star cycle that is a much larger cycle, longer cycle, and it carries meteorites or comets fragments with it. But it also induces these kind of earth changes that we're seeing now, and also changes in human beings, and the human population has an effect on the human population because of the electrical or electromagnetic effects of this companion in terms of the grounding of a current through the whole solar system and the changes on the planet. And
throughout history, people have acknowledged that there is, like even the term lunatic, people notice that there is a certain rise with a full moon of people having strange behavior, that the cosmos has an effect on people. But that always makes me wonder, do people have an effect on the cosmos?
That's an interesting point.
Before we talk about petawatts, how many petawatts does 8 billion people on the planet give off?
I don't think we should be talking about Catholic Priest here.
Well, before discussing
petawatts, Jason.
Before discussing it, and to illustrate what you were mentioning before, the combination of the approaching nemesis and cometary swarm.
Nemesis is such an awesome name, though.
It's a goddess that was chastising the powerful who were oppressing the masses. So quite an apt name.
Yeah, exactly.
Nemesis for the elite, you mean?
Yeah. It was chastising the powerful.
As long as it's not nemesis for human beings. For a human being.
And one example of this, the synergic action between Nemesis and the swarm, is that Nemesis grounds the sun. Therefore, the electric field between the ionosphere and the planet is reduced.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very electric field that destroys most incoming asteroids. So Nemesis with the Nemesis neutralize our main defense mechanism against entering asteroids, and the swarm brings more and more asteroids.
And not only that, but it also reduces the Earth's magnetic field, which protects
the population. Asteroids?
The population of the planet protects us against cosmic radiation, which may have some unknown effects on the human organism and psyche, and
of course, probably
zombies.
No, but cosmos has obviously an influence on human beings. Do human beings have an influence on cosmos? Well, for millennia, it was the belief of rulers, of scientists, of philosophers. It's still a predominant belief in China, since for almost 4 millennia in China there is this belief in a concept called mandate of heaven. Mandate of heaven postulates that. Do you want to read it, Neil?
It's funny you mentioned that. I have a quote here from one of Mike Bailey's books, Exodus to Arthur. So he's describing this mandate of heaven. The Chinese believed that an emperor could reign only while he enjoyed the mandate of heaven, that is, while he looked after his people. If for any reason he failed to look after their well-being, heaven would withdraw its mandate, and the emperor and his ruling dynasty would be deposed. The close proximity of the end of the Xia dynasty to the 1628 BC dust veil event, so that would be dust as in cometary dust. The end of the Shang dynasty to the 1159 BC dust veil event, and the end of the Xian dynasty at the start of the Han dynasty sometime around 207 BC suggests that perhaps the effects of these dust veils caused by comet dust loading of the atmosphere, were tied up with the mandate concept. Heaven would have been seen to withdraw its mandate when the sky darkened, the crops failed, and the famine ensued, bringing death to large numbers of people. The emperor, and this is important, guilty or not, gets the blame for failing his people. In the aftermath of a calamitous dust veil event, the political upset could easily lead to the deposing of the ruling regime.
But here we have an interesting thing. Can I say something on that? Because if you think about it, it's basically telling anybody who wants to rule or be an established authority on the planet that they have to really look after the people in order to maintain control. But instead, they continue to do this whole manipulation thing. And I just think that's interesting, because if they had really been doing their job, then a crop failure would not have been such a big issue. But because they create this commerce and this, corporatism and mercantilism and agriculturalism, and have people dependent on a scarcity model for an economy so that they can get rich and wealthy and have power, because they don't create a society that's, sort of egalitarian and everybody's supporting each other and everybody's building things and constructing a society that is built to last and protect the human race from all manner of catastrophe and problem, of course they get exactly what they deserve. So the emperor is guilty in that sense. The leaders are guilty when that kind of stuff comes and affects the people, because they could have been spending that 11,000 years building a society that could survive it. But instead they lie and cheat and steal and conceal the information and saying, oh, it'll delay. And then at the end, the shit hits the fan and they get their head chopped off. And like, is it their fault? Yeah, it is their fault. Period.
Yeah. Actually, this concept of mandate of heaven was not only applied in the Eastern world. In the Western world, until recently, 19th century, in the emergence of the clockwork model of the universe, where cosmic events and human affairs were totally uncorrelated, you had a belief and probably conviction that those two spheres were intimately related. For example, during the Roman empires, you have some chroniclers like Michael the Syrian that structure the chronicles, so their historical accounts. For each period, they have two paragraphs. One paragraph with human political affairs, abuse of the elites, tyranny, lies, suffering of the masses, exploitation. And on the other side of the page, you have the chapter dedicated to cosmic events. And then in the conclusive words, for each period of time, for each year, for each reign, the chroniclers draw the conclusions and the links between elites' behavior and calamities. And go ahead. To give an example, in this book that is under preparation, when you look at history, actually, you see a strong correlation between the collapse of empires and cosmic events, as if empires are based on oppression, exploitation of the masses, more resources, more power. And to keep the oppression going, you have to use more violence and more lie. You have to deceive the people in order that they keep you as a king, to keep control. And apparently, the lies, the violence, the suffering build up and eventually trigger some cosmic reaction. That might be what happened to the 15th dynasty, 1500 BC in Egypt, with the Santorin eruption of other calamities. Probably what happened in the 14th century in Europe, with the plague that lasted 4 centuries and other natural catastrophes. And I focus on one example, one short period of time from 549 to 591. And with Laura, we compiled all the catastrophes that were compiled by 8 different chroniclers in the Roman Empire. And over the span of 42 years, you have accounts of comets, 12 times, earthquakes, 15 times, and plague, 15% in 15% of the listed years. Well, those statistics, they don't give much data about the intensity of the events. But when you read what happened, the description of the events, like the plague in Constantinople. It's 60% of the people who died. It's the emperor giving gold to find people to dig graveyards. This is collective pits for 70,000 corpses. It's a huge, huge magnitude. And actually, this series of calamities happened, as I said, between 549 and 591, which was around the end of the reign of Justinian. And Justinian was one of the most despotic emperor the Roman Empire has ever experienced.
Well, that's when Mike Bailey puts approximately the 540 AD event. I mean, and that's hard science. I mean, it's hard to explain it any other way than.
And you have Procopius, historian, probably the most prominent historian of the Roman Empire, a Roman historian, who clearly draws a parallel. He writes about all the abuse perpetrated by Justinian, and there's a lot. It was like our modern time leaders, same lies, same violence, same hypocrisy. And so he lists all those abuses, and then he describes the calamities. And he concludes by talking about a correlation between both. So for a long time in the Eastern world and in the Western world, the vision of the universe did not dissociate cosmic events and human affairs. Actually, it was the opposite, and both were intimately related.
Yeah, so that leads us into the question of whether they are in somewhat, or what the mechanism is that would establish that kind of relationship, or if there is a mechanism. But, I mean, if you look at it today, the powers that be today are causing poverty, suffering, famine, starvation. They're even causing disease and plague to a certain extent by their policies. So they're doing all of that in the absence of it being done by some kind of cosmic force or a meteorite or a meteorite impact. So it's almost like, in some way, the correlation there is that the elite go ahead and actually cause all of this suffering, and then the universe, or whatever you want to call it, whatever force this is, comes along and says, "Okay, you want some of that? Here you go." And because that's basically what we think is if these events come to pass, that's what's going to happen. It's just going to be a multifold increase of the kind of suffering that the elites are wreaking on the population. At the minute, they're just going to do the same thing, because they've caused poverty in Africa for decades. Starvation, poverty, and starvation for decades. But it's just going to be expanded by a cosmic event. It's going to be expanded to the rest of the population. It's going to be brought home to the people who have been doing it.
I think the problem with this particular line of discussion is that there's a lot of esoteric and spiritualism behind that idea, though. Because people believe fundamentally in a depersonalized universe, the clockwork universe, as Pierre was saying, that they see it as this almost dead kind of machine, a machine that's
impartial.
That's by some sort of weird random accident, called the Big Bang, things were set into motion, and all the wheels turn, and eventually they'll stop turning. But that there's no personalization of the universe. That there's no life. That a planet isn't alive in any real sense. Or that a sun or a solar system.
No consciousness, no intelligence behind it, really.
Yeah, what you said, Joe, is an important point. This clockwork model denies. With this clockwork model of the universe, responsibility of human beings was dead, God was dead, and consciousness was dead. So after this analysis of historical data and philosophical beliefs, the next question is, does it make sense scientifically? And actually, there are some pieces of evidence that suggest that it's totally plausible. There's one study that if you type on Google Professor Robert Jahn, Jahn, and Brenda Dunes, Dunnes, you should find about their life and experiment. For years, for decades, they investigated the relations between consciousness and matter. And for that, they conducted something like 2,500 trials. And basically, it was always the same experiment. You have subjects, normal subjects, not clairvoyants or special people. You ask normal subject to try to influence a random event generator. flip of a coin or whatever. And they found that actually, over 2,500 trials, I think 20 years of research, they found that indeed human beings had an influence on so-called random events on matter. They found that the influence was small, a few percent, but it was statistically very significant. But now, okay, that's the first point. Small influence, but statistically very significant. Another of the discovery that some people had an influence, but influence that was opposite to what they wanted. When they were focusing on head, they were getting more tails than head in a statistically significant way. Right. So that's a major nail in the coffin of New Age. Right. You might not create the reality the way you wish. Exactly. But what you think, what you believe, lies or truth, might have an influence on the universe. But yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, I have another thing, because again, we're kind of in this whole spirituality kind of New Agey area where we're talking about things that aren't necessarily 100% concrete scientifically, although we have this sort of thing where you can affect, obviously in a statistically significant way, the outcome of some sort of random chance event. But throughout all kind of like philosophical and esoteric systems, they have this statement, as above, so below. Kind of like this idea that everything in the universe kind of increases in complexity, but functions more or less the same way on each level, conceptually speaking, you know? And so if you look at your body, right? So if you have a cancerous growth in your body, or you have some sort of diseased section of the body, your body mobilizes an autoimmune response to go and destroy the fuck out of it, basically, indiscriminately. Your immune system is not completely discriminate. It'll go in there, and even a cell that may not be contributing in any negative way, just the fact that it looks mildly wrong, has the wrong molecule attached to it, your body will just destroy it.
Yeah, and to follow your analogy, and to go on with the description of the study conducted by Jan and Dunes, how does the immune system detect a cancerous cell? Or how does the cancerous cell signal its presence? So they went on with a study about the interaction between consciousness and matter, and discovered that when people were related and trained together to influence random events, it was more effective if people were close, like lovers, like relatives in the same family, like old-time friends, which suggests two things: that A, there might be some synergetic effects when a group of people work together, acting together, and B, that if a group of people share the same set of beliefs, of cultural reference, information, then the message sent by the group is not chaotic. One believes white, one believes black, one believes green, one believes red, but they all resonate on the same frequency and all have in their consciousness the same type of information, which branch on the next theoretical field, which is information theory.
And in the Bible it says if even two of you should agree, it would be an unstoppable force in the Bible, you know. It says if two people agree, you know, just agree type of thing. So it's interesting. But what I was going to say is, why does the body go and attack some cells? You know, what is a cancerous cell? A cancerous cell is one that stops functioning for the survival and betterment of the body and starts to function for itself, to consume only for itself, to bring all kinds of stuff in, to feed on sugars in the body, and, you know, just constantly works to just reproduce its own self in its own way, and no longer as a part of the body. It separates itself from the entire biological system, and then the body realizes that, you know, it can't have that. Your cell cannot be just living for itself. It has to live for the perpetuation of the body. And in a certain sense, we see that in the world today. We see lots of people who turn in on themselves. All they're doing is me, mine, feed me, consume only for me. And so in a certain sense, they are kind of like a cancer cell or a malfunctioning cell that no longer works to sustain the entire social system, but instead only wants to draw on itself. And when you have a lot of people doing that, does that attract a cosmic autoimmune response?
Now,
Yeah, for that idea, you would have to see the entire universe, including the planet, as some kind of a living system. Not like the way you described before, where people tend to look at it as a sterile, mechanistic, right. Impartial.
You got to take that.
You got to have some idea that you have to suspend disbelief or get over the programming of modern science with this mechanistic view and assume that there is some kind of an intelligent living system and it's beyond just us, that we're part of it. It extends to the planet and extends to the solar system and to the cosmos.
There is more evidence in the world for what I just said than there is for what they said, because there is no instance of a natural existing system that is disconnected, not connected, not symbiotic, not organic, not living and growing and expanding. There is no such system in the entire universe that is observable.
Yeah,
the human body itself, 10% of the cells in your body are yours. The rest are symbiotic organisms that live inside you. You are 10% of your body is yours. The rest is other things that help you out, help you with digestion, and the entire Earth, its surface is covered by all these symbiotic life forms and every other. Yeah. I mean, every system within nature functions exactly the way that I was describing.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to say that the universe, the solar system, doesn't function the same way as the universe itself doesn't.
Yeah, just because it can't be measured, it doesn't mean that if it can be measured at a local level as being true, then why not expand it out to a broader level?
Think about it like this way. When you're talking about science, in that particular, from that perspective, imagine that you have a man inside of a prison without a window, sitting there arguing about whether or not the color of the wall is one thing or the other. You can't measure it. Of course you can't. You're contained by the universe. You can't step outside and say, is it all? What's going on here?
Although, so the idea there is that obviously there is a relationship between all kind of living things in some way or other, and they do operate in tandem, and they're related to each other. They operate, symbiotically. But then the question in terms of how the human beings, individually, or more importantly, as a collective, 8 billion human beings on the planet, might be in some way influencing catastrophes or cyclical catastrophes or something out there in the universe, in terms of as a whole, 8 billion human beings giving off some kind of a signal through their thoughts or their collective, the collective unconscious or whatever, sending some kind of a signal off the planet out in space. It's not hard physics.
How does your kidney send a message to your brain?
Yeah, it's at the level. Yeah, it's at the level of it's at the level at the microscopic or molecular level type of thing, where messages are sent.
What does that even mean, though?
Yeah, well, supposedly they're physical objects, but there's a physical.
There's an exchange of information that takes place.
But it's physical.
Right here, we're saying that a foreign body enters into the vicinity of the sun, and that a connection forms. Whatever that connection is, a connection forms between two bodies that are separated by space, right?
Yeah.
We're saying that Nemesis comes in and that it connects into some sort of electricity channel of the sun, right?
Yeah.
We've said this. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to answer in a definite way to this question, because if there was a classical electric link between the sun and the approaching Nemesis, we would see an increased electrical activity of the sun. So the connection might not happen on the usual electric level, but yes, there's a connection probably. This being said,
there's a connection between. You say that the sun powers the Earth's rotation.
Yeah.
How does it do that?
It does not.
Does energy that is in the sun at one point ever move across space and in any way touch the Earth?
Yes.
Oh, isn't that can you communicate across electric lines?
Of course.
With electricity? Yes. Well, then there you go.
Within the human body, obviously, a lot of the processing of signals and all is done with electrical signals. I mean, in your brain, it's all fundamentally electrical. Neurons and nerve impulses and neurotransmitters are all fundamentally electrical, and even at the level of quantum physics, this idea of quantum entanglement and action at a distance, where you have these two, protons or neutrons.
Electrons having the same spin.
Electrons, sorry, having the same spin. You know, when
So we're basically saying that there's a large body of scientific evidence that is defending the position that we're saying.
Yeah, but it's not applied to on a large scale to human beings and human evolution and human history and
cosmic events.
And cosmic
that's
events.
a surprise.
Well, I think actually the link, most of the visible phenomena can be explained electrically, but the most fundamental ones probably require the use of information theory, and quantum physics. To go on with this notion of resonance, remember when a group of related people want to influence together a random event, they have a stronger influence,
right?
Synergetic influence.
Right.
Look at the human population now, the world population, 8 billion people. Because of mainstream medias, they all store the same information, the same lies propagated by medias in their consciousness.
Right.
They all are on the same live frequency.
Yeah.
And that can have a big influence because it might not be a purely electric phenomenon. As you said, there might be some quantum factor to consider. But the quantum physics say that nothing exists per se. Everything is probability. It's only the intervention of the observer that triggers the collapse of the quantum wave. That's a broad range of possibilities and make one of the possibilities materialize while the other one does not materialize. Probably the phenomenon that is occurring is that the fact that 8 billion human beings resonate on the same frequency spread by mainstream media, mainstream disinformation, send a very coherent signal, information-wise, as a global observer to the rest of the universe that trigger that increase the probability of the cosmic reaction we are describing.
I recorded the sound of that signal that the 8 billion human beings are
played. Hopefully no comet will drop on the house.
The sound of it is something along the lines of...
Well, the thing is,
I think it's what I thought about it.
I think the problem
is worse than that.
I don't think that 8 billion people are all the people who believe the same lie. I think that they all believe like a series of actually discordant lies.
Yeah, it's incoherence, noise.
It's totally incoherent noise.
I think compared to the other catastrophes, Justinian plague, the Black Plague, all of the 15th dynasty, you have a critical mass as far as world population is concerned, 8 billion, and I think there's never been this consistency in the beliefs of human beings because there's never been such global medias and scams like man-made global warming, like the elites are the myth of democracy, like terrorism, like Al-Qaeda. Like, there's a lot of slide. I don't say that 8 billion people believe it, but I say there's a critical mass. There's never been billions of human beings believing this amount of the same lies. Yeah. And that's a major factor as far as the influence of the observer is concerned.
Yes, all these people are essentially collectively believing as the observer, as a collective observer, they're all believing in lies of one form or another on the same frequency, i.e. it's not truth. And they're sending a signal there that basically says that they are not interested in reality or in what's really going on. They want to live in an illusion, and maybe there's a function within the universe that when it sees a mass of people believing in that and asserting their intention or their desire to essentially believe in lies and illusion, that it says, okay, well, that can only last so long, and there's some function that just wipes them out and starts again, because the whole process is designed to get people to see reality and see truth and see the world as it is, or at least try to build a future or view a future that's based on truth and what is and what is actually happening, rather than a subjective illusion. Because if you focus on subjective illusions, there's no end to it. Anybody can come up with an endless number of subjective illusions that
well, I mean, like when you have gangrene on your hand, there's a certain point where they amputate it, just because it's gone too far.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the situation that we have here on the planet, is that there are people obviously who do want to see the truth, but they are so few and far between, and they probably feel that it's a bit unfair. But I think from a cosmic perspective, this town needs an enema.
Yeah.
Seriously.
The annoying thing is that reality, truth, is not really any worse.
No, not at all.
Than the subjective world that people live in and want to believe in. I mean, there's nothing horrible about reality except the fact that you've been living a lie for so long, and especially when you believe that the world's a lovely place and our glorious leaders are doing their best for us. Sure, it's difficult to come out of that, but you got yourself into it. You got to come out of that. But once you're out the other side, reality isn't so bad. The world is the universe is a very interesting, fascinating place. I mean,
here's the thing. I mean,
you're not losing anything by giving it up.
When you face the reality, there's all these different ways that you can die. Comets can come down, sinkhole, all this different stuff, diseases, other animals get eaten by a lion or whatever. There's all these different things. Those things haven't disappeared. No. Like the regular dangers of reality, like no government has ever, or no medical science has ever really actually ameliorated those things anyway. Mm-hmm. So actually, when you get rid of them and you stop believing in them and giving them power, basically you're just back to the core fundamental problems of life on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, basically they just cause more. It's actually worse to believe in them than it is to actually believe in objective reality.
Yeah, and Joe, you mentioned that you made this snoring sound and say that was the main cause of the coming disaster.
That's the sound of the signal giving off.
Yeah, the signal. It might be even worse because, as you say today, the truth is available. If you take 9/11, you have 50% roughly of people believing that 9/11 was happened according to the official story.
How many percentage?
About 1 out of 2, about 50%. So 50% believe in this lie, resonate on the same lie frequency, while the truth is out there. While there are thousands of websites that show how the official theory doesn't hold water. Mm. And on the analytical level, yeah, go on.
I think it's even worse than that in a way that I think most people, there might be 50% of people who believe or disbelieve the official story, but they have 9/11, for example. But that's only when they're asked on it by a CNN pollster. The rest of the time, they don't care one way or the other. That's the big problem. They just don't even think about it. They don't think about anything that they should be thinking about. It doesn't interest them. So that, for me, that's the kind of fatalistic, cynical or negative viewpoint on it, is that people just really, a lot of these people are really a lost cause in that they don't care or they can't care. I don't know what it is, why they don't care, but,
And there are some...
I think in the end it's a moot point whether or not they believe the 9/11. I think the 9/11 is such a drop in a massive ocean of perpetual lies for the last, probably 10,000 years of human history, of a constant nonstop stream of lies, socially, civilization,
agriculture, food, health, medicine,
religion, war,
democracies, religions, science,
democracies, tyrannies,
politics.
all this different stuff, believing in these systems that are just fraudulent. I think that the 9/11 is just a drop in a massive ocean of lies.
But that's the question. If you took a person, one of these people, who we say is maybe a lost cause or doesn't care, and would it be possible, if take one as an example, and try and school him or her, try and present them with the truth and make the choice as clear as possible, just to see whether or not ultimately at the core of their being they would choose the truth over the illusion. Like in the Matrix where
blue pill, red pill.
Well, not the red pill, blue pill part, but where Morpheus is telling Neo that he
only gives the truth.
That these people that he's walking in the street, that
they're so hopelessly inured
in the
system
that they will fight you
to defend it.
If you try and bring them out of it.
Right.
So it's like I think people should have paused before they get into this idea that they can save anybody, because it's like I have this story, right, that I keep telling, and it's an analogy. You've probably heard it before, but it's basically, I don't think I've mentioned it on the radio, but it's basically for me, it's a good example of what I'm talking about on the human condition in a way. It was a cousin of my dad's, maybe 50 years ago, something, walking down the street, and he saw a man. It was actually a gypsy man, beating or assaulting in some way his wife, or a woman, as he saw it. As my dad's cousin saw it on the street, saw this man assaulting a woman, so he ran over and grabbed the man and pushed him off the woman and held him against the wall. Before he could do anything or say anything, the woman that was being beaten by the man previously on the street jumped on his back and started beating him.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently it was his wife, the guy's wife. And so she was, you know what I mean? So
that's
an example of,
situation,
and you apply that then to truth and lies type of thing. If you went along and said, listen, I'm going to take this person, I'm going to force them to see the truth because I know it's good for them. And ultimately, after many attempts to try and save that person, you might ultimately have to realize that that person really, really does not want to be saved and will not like you for trying.
Well, if you believe in evolution, which you don't really believe in it, but it's okay. It's a nice kind of analogy. There's a large number of supposedly mutations that happen in a population that are just completely unsuccessful, and that person, that mutated being dies off very quickly.
I believe in ultimate evolution.
Yeah, and I think that a lot
now.
of these people, I think that now the human race has entered an area where there's a lot of mental evolution and consciousness evolution, that a lot of it's about developing a brain that has this kind of thing called consciousness and can have it and all this stuff. And so what basically is that a large part of the population is actually just sort of like a consciousness mutation, and they're about to get selected out in a certain sense,
Well,
because there's people that actually write books about how it's better to believe lies than the truth. And they write things about how great it is to basically deceive yourself, and that you have all of these self-deceivers. And, if we hadn't been deceiving ourselves for the last 11,000 years, if we hadn't been doing that, we would have a social system in place that would be able to withstand an ice age, that would be able to withstand all these things. We would have said, okay, hold on, there's shit happens, and we need to prepare for this. And we could have developed something, but we didn't. We were deceiving ourselves, and now we're about to find out what the cost of that self-deception is.
But is there any cost to a person who loves illusion? Is there really any cost to that person in the grand scheme of things?
I think yes.
Is it not just a process, a long-term evolutionary process through multiple incarnations, and it doesn't really matter if those people really people who write the books about how it's good to deceive yourself? This is a really good world to do that, because you can do that and get away with it. You can do that and have a really nice, illusory, deceptive life.
If there's no cost, then there's no point.
Well, yeah, maybe.
If nothing in the universe,
but
is free,
nihilism goes a long way.
There's no free lunch. This whole idea that there's a group of people who can just sort of like consume and consume and consume and do whatever the fuck they want, and they don't have to pay a price at some sort of spiritual or cosmic level.
For a lot of people, I don't think they do.
I don't know, because that would be too much like a free lunch, and I don't believe in a free lunch. I believe that everyone does pay a price for their self-deception.
I don't know.
Whatever. It's very last minute of their life. Probably all balls. I
would like that.
Yeah, but otherwise they would be having a free ride, and I don't think anybody has a free ride. I don't think necessarily that they have karma or that they have a soul or anything like that. Well, I think that they suffer tremendously.
Of course, I don't think, when I said this is a good place, this is a good planet for people to be on who like to deceive themselves. People can't deceive themselves in the way that I'm describing, or the way that you were describing, without suffering, because, you take it too far. You deceive yourself that the jungle's a nice place to go for a picnic, and you get your ear bitten off by a panther. That's not...
It's not a fun experience.
No, you suffer. These people obviously do suffer from their illusions, right? But there are people who benefit greatly from...
I think people fake happiness a lot. I think that all these people who... There's no such thing as blissful ignorance. I think that from moment to moment that they wonder why all this bad shit happens. But look how many people are on, antidepressants. And, people are going around with this kind of forced smile on their face. Everything's fine! Everything's fine! But really, life sucks for 99.9. I think even rich people, life sucks. I think the people in power, life sucks for them, too. They're not really having a fun time of it. That doesn't mean that you should pity them at all, because of course they're bastards and they deserve what they get. But I think that everyone is suffering, and
then that makes it even worse, because it's completely pointless, because nobody's really getting a benefit from all the suffering that's going on. So what's the point in all the suffering? Why is anybody creating any suffering if nobody's really benefiting? Surely someone.
I think they are.
I mean, even if we all have to suffer for our miserable human lives, it would be nice to think that at least there's a purpose to it, and even if it's some evil overlord is sucking the juice of the suffering from us, at least there's a point to it. Because otherwise, it's like there's no point. This is all pointless.
Well, that's the what do they call it? The existentialist kind of opinion of it, or whatever it is. For there's no point to it all, and
it's nihilism.
I don't think so. Nihilism. Yeah, there you go.
Well, there are some examples going back to the relation between human beings and cosmic reactions. There are at least two examples that show that individuals can attract or at least have influence on cosmic events. There is a first example of Roy Cleveland Sullivan, a U.S. park ranger. This guy got thunderstruck 8 times in his life.
Struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning, yeah. Thunderstruck.
You can't get struck by thunder. Thunder's the sound.
Thunder's the noise.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning 8 times. And so some people say, yeah, but it's because he was a park ranger, he was always in the forest, and there's more probability to be struck by lightning. Well, actually, probability is very low even if you're in the forest, and especially when you're Roy Cleveland Sullivan, that after being struck for the first time, was escaping lightnings. As soon as he was seeing a cloud, he was running away from the cloud, and several times he got struck by lightning where there was no cloud. And even one time he saw a cloud far away, he ran into his car because he thought, okay, it's a Faraday cage, it's insulator, I won't be struck. He was struck even in his car.
He was chasing him.
There seemed to have been...
How is this guy still alive?
Something in his guy. No, he died in 1983, I think.
Was he struck by lightning when he died?
No. No. And...
what did he die of?
That would have been ironic. I don't know. It's not mentioned on this document.
That would be interesting.
Oh, he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the age of 71 over an unrequited love.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this other guy. This guy is Radovike Lajic, 50 years old. He lives in Belgrade, near Belgrade. He lives in Bosnia. And this guy got his house struck 6 times by meteorites. So having your house struck once by a meteorite is very unlikely, even in those times of high asteroid activity. But 6 times, you start to think it's not due solely to random chance.
Well, I mean, was he like a Satanist or something? I mean, if you're going to carry this hypothesis over, we got to prove that he's been doing something very, very
It would be
bad.
interesting, but what is mentioned is that he believes strongly in UFOs, and he strongly believes that UFOs are sending the meteorites.
Oh, yeah.
So,
there you go.
Well, I suspect that he came up with that belief
Because
after.
Yeah, post facto, yeah.
It's probably, for individual cases, it would be very difficult to establish the direct causal relationship.
What is going on in the mind, or the belief, or
well, something that I've always
what
thought
triggers?
is that, the large majority of people on the planet kind of like have a collective soul or something, that they have this collective unconscious thing that, what's his name was talking about, Jung or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually it's kind of a collective soul, that they're all part of like the same body. So that just because, one guy isn't worshiping Satan, it's the 15 neighbors that might be.
Maybe he's resonating,
Yeah.
with people on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
So what are we saying here? What are we saying? The question is,
Well, it seems that
how do human beings influence the universe, or gravitate, or attract cyclical catastrophe, or indeed do they?
it seems that they are cyclical catastrophes anyway, and that on a quantum level, the amount of lies believed by a critical mass of individuals modify the probabilities of those catastrophes to occur. So the solution, if we're not past the point of no return, is to reach an opposite critical mass of individuals that would see the world, the universe as it is.
Sure. We'll get that done tomorrow.
That's going to happen.
We'll get that done tomorrow, and then by Tuesday, everything will be okay, yeah?
Yeah, let's get started on that tonight.
Yeah.
Tea and biscuits.
I mean, it seems that getting back to what we were saying towards the beginning of the show is that the elites, at least the elite, the elites above the elite, the super duper, uber top secret government,
The big kahuna.
The big kahuna people. Somebody, they surely know what the truth is. Maybe they're in denial about it, but they've written reports. There's lots of scientific reports, and there's even presidential and NSA reports and CIA reports and stuff on major climate change. And we suspect strongly that they're also aware of cometary bombardments. I mean, when you have people like Mike Bailey writing books that point out that it happens quite regularly, surely the powers that be are aware of this. Yet they're trying their best to make sure that no, or as few people as possible, become aware of it, and realize that the powers that be, that the elites can't protect them. They're trying to make sure that everybody stays under this illusion that they can be protected by their leaders against anything. And if there's certain things that obviously the leaders can't protect against, then they ignore them. And in terms of the chaotic weather, we've had a few years of serious flooding and droughts that has caused serious problems with crop yields, and we expect some major food shortages and food prices in the not too distant future, which leads me to the story that I've been aware of for a couple of years now, and that has been in the media for a few years, but nobody pays any attention to it, which is about what Western countries, governments, and the Chinese and Middle Eastern governments are all doing in Africa. They're all buying up large tracts of land in Africa for the purpose of apparently growing various types of crops and fruit and different kind of foodstuffs. Some of it they claim to be for biofuels, but I don't believe the biofuel business, because that just ties into the whole kind of peak oil. And
it's like these people read 1984 and then didn't see it as like, oh shit, this could happen. They were like, oh yeah, this could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
because I mean, it's not just that they're buying up I'm talking about massive tracts of land in Africa, but the Chinese specifically, anyway, have been building massive. They've basically been building cities in Africa. There's one. This is reported by the BBC a few years ago about a Chinese-built city on the outskirts of Angola's capital, Luanda. The city, and even given a name, it's called the Nova Ciudad de Quilamba, the new city of Quilamba, and it's designed to hold up to 500,000 people. There are 750 eight-story apartment buildings, 12 schools, and more than 100 retail units. And it covers 12,355 acres, but it's completely empty. There's nobody in it. Brand new city, essentially, or a large town for 500,000, well, a city for 500,000 people, and it's empty. And that's just one of them. And at the same time, they're building all these, they're developing vast tracts of African land for agriculture, supposedly. And
over the last 3 years, land grabbing, that's the way they call this recent phenomena, has been amounting over the last 3 years to 200,000 square miles. That's more than the total surface of California. So obviously the elites know, at least partly, what is going to happen. But from their moves, seed banks, land grab, building cities, I'm not sure they're aware of all the parameters and all the consequences of what might happen.
No, because based on what we expect and what we know from...
There's nowhere to hide.
Exactly.
There's no place to run, you know?
I mean, I'm sure they've used their best analysts to come up with answers to the problem as to what to do if, you have major food riots, for example, in the US or in any country. But I would say that, assuming that they're smart enough and that they are able to really understand the situation, they're probably doing this kind of thing in as many places as possible. They've probably done South America, Africa,
well, they
somewhere
have.
in Asia,
I mean, there's a lot
Australia.
Of people. Yeah, sure.
Build us a few cities on every continent, and we'll take our pick whenever the shit hits the fan.
Yeah, and you notice that it's mainly in the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that suggests global cooling, ice age. But based on the last ice age, it was you had major droughts. So maybe that's why they're put in the southern hemisphere, or with the northern hemisphere being largely either covered in ice or kind of semi-frozen tundra type land. The southern hemisphere apparently was very dry. So maybe putting in some kind of eco biosphere systems. I think they are actually. I was reading something about that in Africa, where they're putting in these big kind of domed growing areas. And
what this reminds me of?
With solar panels and wind power and all this kind of stuff. It's almost like, it's basically like elite survivalists.
You know what this reminds me of? There's a city built into like a cliff or something like that, like this massive thing, and it's kind of a bit of a mystery in the U.S. It's kind of like supposedly that the Indians came in and built it or something like that, but I don't think that there's much evidence that it was actually ever lived in. It makes you wonder if they tried this before, if some sort of elite group of people said, "Ooh, let's do this," and they kind of built like a city inside of one of these, sort of cliffs or something like that they were going to go to there when the shit hit the fan. And I wonder how that worked out for them.
Well, an entire city has been excavated in Turkey.
Yeah.
That's underground.
Yeah, there's that underground city in Turkey, and I think that they keep doing this, and they're fucking retarded, to be quite honest. Because there's no reason for them not to develop civilization to the point where everybody can survive and have fun and be fine. There's no reason for them not to. It's just totally ridiculous behavior. It's utterly ignorant and pointless in the end. It's so pointless because what are they going to rule over? Nothing. I mean, they're not going to go somewhere and survive. Setting up their seed banks and let's build a city that's exactly like all the other cities that we've built, but in this other area, and then we'll fly 500,000 of the best people, and it's sort of like Dr. Strangelove, and 5 wives per man or whatever it is. I mean, it's just fantasy. It's complete fantasy.
At the same time, you cannot expect from the dark elites, from the psychopathic elites, more than what they are able to. By nature, they see what they want to see. They dwell into wishful thinking. They feed on the suffering. They use lies and deception. They enjoy the suffering of the others. So inevitably, if us having the responsibility, as the masses, having the responsibility to believe or not in their lies, to fall or not for their traps, if we fail to make the right choice, so you reach this critical mass of lies, of suffering, and you trigger those cosmic reactions. So to some extent, the choice between two possible futures is more in the hands of people with a conscience than in the hands of the elites, psychopaths who act like machines, who just do what they are supposed to do, and who cannot do more.
It's not so much the mandate of heaven; it's the mandate of the people. I mean, the people have spoken. They've decided, which group of people they're going to follow, which group of people they're going to believe in, and as much as we say, "Hey, you're not really thinking this shit through," they're going to do it, and they're going to suffer for it. To be quite honest, because this situation is really. I mean, we're talking about like an ice age. We're talking about like, volcanoes erupting and dust filling the atmosphere, blocking out the sun possibly. I mean, which has happened before. A dust cloud, dust cover, bombardment, the slowing of the rotation of the Earth, the weakening of the magnetic field, which protects us from a whole shitload of stuff like radiation. You're going to have people, walk outside and get like, third-degree burns, from the radiation or something like that because they're in the wrong area. I mean, these people think that it's ridiculous.
It's kind of like the entire universe is it's like a big garden, or it's like a big, it's kind of like a big garden, and each planet, each inhabited planet is like a little isolated garden in and of itself, where a particular type of plant grow, or a particular variation or a variety of plants grow, and there are particular types of plants that are beneficial and that are meant to grow there, and then there are weeds, and every once in a while the universal gardener comes around to look at each of the gardens, to tend the plants and stuff, and if it sees a bunch of sees that weeds or toxic plants have overtaken the garden, then it's like, okay, get the
weed killer,
get the Roundup out. where's Monsanto, you know? And just, start again, you know? It's not a problem. Let's just start again. Whoops, this one went a bit wrong. It was a good try, but, and we got some interesting variations, interesting hybrids. Which brings me to zombies.
Yeah.
Why are there so many zombie movies around in the past few years, and zombie, the concept of zombies, the zombie idea around, it's almost like that ties into the idea of this feedback, almost like a collective unconscious where what people are or the way they're going or the way their minds are, the way they have devolved essentially into a zombie-like state is kind of fed back to the creative principles on the planet who then come out with these ideas of like this one with Brad Pitt, WWZ, World War Z.
Yeah,
it's this zombie movie par excellence, it's like...
No, I've noticed in
ridiculous.
Because I do drawing sometimes, and I notice that I have a lot of zombie imagery in my head that I have to resist, basically.
Yeah, where is that coming from?
Well, I always explain it as like, didn't we... No, maybe we shouldn't go into that. That's way too
fringe.
Off into the fringe.
Jason, we've gone everywhere there is to go. Go on.
Well, I look at the world as there's a river that floats above everybody's head where all the creative ideas that could possibly ever be had are. And, some people's heads are just high enough that they kind of walk through this river and they get ideas so that just, things come down the pipe. And that's why, people all over the world are seeing the zombie stuff because it's just there. It's in the other.
It still leaves the question of why zombies now? And something I thought was, it's almost like the collective unconscious speaking back to itself.
Yeah.
Possibly in anticipation of a mass wipeout
100%.
from plague.
Yeah, totally.
That would look
a zombie
horrific.
plague?
Well, in the sense that there would be the living dead.
Yeah.
That you would have mass casualties.
Right.
And such a horrific situation that people, those who are still alive, many of them will wish they were dead.
Oh yeah,
that's the quintessential horror movie.
Right.
We look at it at a distance; it's just a movie.
Right.
But we also go through it because we are sort of horrified by it.
Right.
It's not just coming through in movies. Nearly every major city in the West holds annual zombie parades where people will actually act out what it is to be like to be a zombie.
Yeah, it's covered the movies. It's covered actual life where people have been started
acting. Security.
Yeah, people have started acting like zombies in real life, like eating each other's faces. You've had movies. You had they've used zombies for training exercises for the military, where they dress people up as zombies and the military goes in and fires. I don't know why they never really explain why they.
It was a promotional thing.
I don't even know if it was. I think they just decided let's have zombies in there. It's just it's the kind of a thing where people wouldn't know. People who do it don't know why they're coming up with the idea of zombies. It just sounds like a good idea,
Yeah.
Like who was on first? They said, well, there's that Brad Pitt movie. We just figured we'd have zombies for a bit of fun to shoot at.
In all fairness, the zombie meme has actually been going around for a long time. It's been here. It's just really burst out.
You mentioned the plague. I think during the show we didn't talk about possible correlation between cometary activity and spaceborne viruses.
That's because we don't want to approach the P word.
We may as well.
No, don't.
So, we've been so doom and gloom.
Very
get all the
quickly,
gloom out.
Usually there's a cliche about meteorites or cometary bombardments. It's one single body hitting the surface of the Earth. And data shows that actually usually it's not one single body involved, but it's swarm, different bodies of different size. And most explosions happen in the atmosphere. It's overhead cometary explosions.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the main damage induced by comets may not be due to the shock wave, but to more intangible factors like airborne viruses. And there is this Indian researcher called Chandra Vikramasinghe of the Buckingham Center for Astrobiology, who published a paper recently showing the presence, I had a picture in front of me of a fossilized diatom, this microorganism, a fused fossil of diatom fused into the meteoric rock, showing that indeed asteroid material can carry viruses, bacteria, and other microorganisms. And
well, throughout history, comets are associated with the coming of plague.
that's where I was coming. The Justinian plague followed a intense episode of cometary activity, and the Black Plague. Before the Black Plague, the beginning of 14th century, there was a strong cometary activity. And there's a bit of delay, but remember that airborne aerosols, microorganisms, can take years to drop from the high atmosphere to the ground. That's why maybe all those new viruses that have been recently discovered are avian viruses, because birds catch them first, and most of them emerge around the Himalayas because that's where the atmosphere is the thinnest. So that's where aerosols, microorganisms, fall the fastest on the surface of the Earth.
Well, what was the topic of our show again?
The topic of our show was like this:
the
Ice Age
Cometh.
We want to understand all this crazy weather, what it might be a prelude to. We mentioned Ice Age because, historically speaking, I mean, Ice Ages are a fact.
Yeah,
they've always been preceded by the very signs we're noticing, even increased levels of carbon dioxide. Of course, there were no humans around, no industry around to do it in times past. That's the kind of the
Which
part.
is the question that no one ever seems to answer.
That's the part they leave out. We touched on that by talking about the high levels of CO2 released by the oceans, which totally dwarf any amounts of CO2 that's produced by human activity.
By plants as well.
Yeah, and what we didn't say, that CO2, all CO2 man-made and naturally made, accounts for about 5% of the heating gas, greenhouse gas, the main one being vapor, water vapor. But what we can say about the perspective that clearly the two main indicators of an approaching sun's companion and accompanying cometary swarm, i.e. those two indicators are reduction in solar activity and increase in fireballs. Those two symptoms are still on the rise today, which suggests that Nemesis hasn't reached its aphelion yet, its closest point to the sun. I think so. It's getting closer, and as long as it's getting closer, its consequences, its effects should be on the rise. So from my point of view, data strongly suggests that all the symptoms we've been listing should worsen.
Yeah, I think in terms of the topic of the show, the Ice Age cometh. Ice ages have cometh and goneth several times in history, but as far as we know, or as far as we suspect, they weren't necessarily accompanied by all of the other earth changes that we're seeing, that we mentioned: volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, sinkholes, outgassings, animal die-offs. They weren't all the previous ice ages or mini ice ages or cold periods were not accompanied by all of that, which suggests that something is happening on a much larger scale to the planet, and as Pierre just suggested, that it's possibly associated with the approach of a solar companion. That our solar system is a binary system, and that is the cause. Actually, we have a call here.
Go on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Claire. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Roland from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Hey, Roland.
Hey,
where are you from, dude?
Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Yes.
What's that?
So I was listening to what you were talking about with the universe and creation, and wanted to express it that it appears that the universe, the way it operates, it has seems to be safe valve mechanisms in which when a species starts to endanger the greater good, which is Earth and other life forms, it has cycles during this life period, which is very, very short window period for life to evolutionize. What happens is if any of that life does progress, it has a test in which it brings on comets or ice age, and if that race or human race has been progressing the way it should have, it would have that human race would use its intelligence and its consciousness to ward off such an extreme cataclysmic event or a protection.
Yeah, or overcome it, like what we've been saying. We would have developed,
right, exactly.
Some way to deal with this, but instead we haven't.
Exactly. It's almost like, I hate to say it, but it's almost like it's too late in a sense. I mean, I know there's this thing where we say, well, it's never too late, but the actual fact of the matter is sometimes it is too late. And that's something that I'm not saying that it is, but I think that's something that we need to consider. Because once you are able to deprogram yourself from thinking that you're special or we're special, once you get rid of that, you realize that we're on the same playing field as every other species in this world, and that we're a part of this cycle. And the universe establishes certain cycles, and it's like certain ones are warnings, and then it gives you more warnings, and then boom.
Exactly.
And at a certain point, that's it. Either you progress or you don't. And
yeah, I mean, a lot of people
greater good.
Yeah, a lot of people should really think about that. Like, if say, for instance, worst case scenario, we're looking at like the complete end of our race. I mean, we should really ask ourselves, what have we given to cosmic posterity? What have we left behind? I mean, imagine some extraterrestrial archaeologist comes to Earth 1,000 years from now, and everything's a total barren wasteland, a total ice, and there's no more life at all on the planet. And he's going to dig up, and the first thing he's going to find is a Britney Spears CD, and we've left that to posterity. I mean, that's the great monument to the human race is a bunch of CDs that will never biodegrade, trashing the entire world up.
There's a material aspect of what we would live, and there's also a more immaterial aspect, the information dimension.
Yeah.
What do you call this?
Which is why people, I think,
maybe in collective consciousness, what kind of information, true or false, did we live in this collective memory records?
And I think that's evidence of why we made the megaliths that we have made with writing on these giant, huge structures, these giant stone structures with writing, is that I think at a certain point man had that philosophy, what are we leaving to posterity? And again, I kind of asked that question about now. I mean, do we deserve to live as a race? I mean, does the human race deserve to live? I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I think events and times will tell who will move on and who will not.
Exactly, man. That's some pretty insightful stuff you brought up, dude.
All right, Roland, thanks for your call.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Take it easy.
Bye. You too.
All right, folks, I think we're going to call it a night. We're going to wrap this one up. We've dealt with the topic and more, I think.
Yeah.
As usual, we always like to give some value added on our shows. Keep you guessing. Make stuff up as we go along.
A little bit woo, a little bit wah.
Yeah.
A little bit of what the hell did he just say?
Yeah. So, anyway, thanks to our listeners for listening again, and to our callers. We'll be back next week with another action-packed show about a topic that we will only reveal.
They will flip a coin
midweek
to decide on.
And we try to influence the random event.
We actually put all these topics into like a little
Tombola
Powerball machine, a tumbler, and we just sort of pick them out.
Yeah. But in the meantime, everybody's listening. Y'all, try and influence something somehow for the better rather than for the worse. Anyway.
And the best way to influence for the best is just see the world as it is. Objectively.
Think positive thoughts, but think positive thoughts that are true.
Keep the truth front and center, and keep the faith, the real faith. All right.